just returned from a couple of weeks in the U.S. And I have to say, what a fascinating time to be in America. Why? Well, because on the one hand, the country is being run by the worst political class since at least the Civil War, and possibly the Revolution. Yet, on the other, Americans, individually, are getting it done, and amazingly, still not getting demoralized. Take New York City. The Big Apple is not just a major metropolis in Joe Biden's America, but it also has the misfortune, self-inflicted, it must be said, of being run by a hard left progressive Democrat, Eric Adams. So, on the one hand, the place is regressing, and with the exception of the fact that Times Square is now a tourist mecca rather than a sleaze den, New York is feeling very much like it did during the bad old days of Robert De Niro's Taxi Driver. Are you talking to me? Indeed. It seems that not a day goes by in New York that there isn't some hellacious crime captured on video, such as a motor scooter riding gunman shooting random people on the street in Queens, or a guy stabbing his Lyft driver and then trying to escape by jumping off an elevated highway. Yet, so many of the New Yorkers, the Americans, the ordinary people I met while I was over there, were working every single day to rise above this. People I met like a Bangladeshi migrant who went to America when he was 6 months old and 33 years later sold his software company for millions. And a woman who worked for a rental car agency who, with her husband, managed to work their way out of the projects and into a home of their own in the suburbs. That hustle, that drive, that energy is what actually makes America great, in spite of the best or worst efforts of those who claim to be leading the place. Which, of course, brings us to Joe Biden, who is, of course, the last person you think about when you hear the words hustle, drive, or energy. Just look at him here as a bemused King Charles has to move him on like a dopey tourist gawking at a beef-eater guard. Now, a little later in the show, we're going to take a deep dive into just how unpopular Biden has become, and the likelihood that he will, as I have said multiple times, decide ultimately not to run again. Now, of course, to do that, he would have to solve the Kamala Harris problem. But there is an elegant solution to this, of course. All he has to do is make a speech announcing that he is not running again in 2024, and that, in the interest of democracy, he will not endorse any candidate, and instead allow the primary process to land on the best choice. But who would that be? Well, right now, many people are saying that could be Gavin Newsom, the governor of the incredibly dysfunctional state of California. A number of insiders have pointed to a story in Politico about Gavin Newsom's power networks, which was released this week, as a suggestion that party elders are, behind the scenes, looking to bring him in should the going get too tough for Biden. And tough it is getting. We can see that even reliable media allies are starting to turn against the president. I mean, wouldn't you if you had the job of trying to drag this guy across the line one more time, even though he barely gives you the time of day? The Atlantic, as reliably left as journal as they come, just put out a major story headlined, "Step aside, Joe Biden." Of course, easier said than done when every step threatens to turn into a stumble. New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd, meanwhile, broke the embargo on talking about Navy Joan, Hunter Biden's unacknowledged child, who the president refuses to talk about, or even admit, sadly, exists. Despite claiming to put family first and famously tweeting, quote, "I've had a rule my entire life. No matter what's happening, no matter how important the meeting, I'll always answer a call from my grandchildren," unquote. How touching and how hypocritical